What memories does this stir for you?
Just a bit it's changed, because it's a very long time ago since I first came here.
What was your first memory of walking in here?
Actually being involved with Match of the Day, I mean, that was a dream. The way I started from Match of the Day was all a bit chaotic, because I was in Leeds to do Leeds against Spurs, and the producer, John McGonigal, got a telephone call, and they said, Barry's not doing that match, he's coming to do Crystal Palace and Manchester United. So I was driven back down the motorway.
The commentator on our opening match of the season is Barry Davies.
And I did a commentary on a match where preparation on Crystal Palace was limited to about an hour, looking through the match programme.
George Best with the hair blending into the shirt, and on the front of that hair we find he's growing just a little bit of a beard. Either that or he didn't have time for a shave this morning. Brimmer's come for it, so he was never really there! And Sandler tries to clear it, and Hine gets the touch!
And then I went back into the studio to help Frank Boff, because David Coleman, I should have said, the reason he wasn't doing it was because he lost his voice, which was quite a considerable voice, if you remember.
Well, Barry Davies, the commentator there, is now back to the match, and he's brought with him into the studio tonight the two Palace newcomers, Roger Hind and Jerry Queen.
And, you know, that was the start.
Waters. Oh, yes! Oh, yes!
What a fantastic match it turned out to be.
Comes the best. And it's there. Hunt. Oh, what a goal! Fashanu. Oh, what a goal! Oh, that's a magnificent goal! Gascoigne going to have a crack. He is, you know. Oh, I say!
To make sure that you've joined us then. After this, surely you must.
So tell us about the sort of career path that you had, was to be a dentist.
Yes, missed out on an exam, and Her Majesty said, well, I think you should come in for your national service now. So that changed my life, because I was asked to broadcast on local services football when I came out of the army. And incidentally, this is a true story, the commanding officer, he actually said to me, look, go out and give it a go. Otherwise, every time you look at that fellow David Coleman, you're going to think, that could have been me. Then had 3 years working for ITV, and latterly there was this story that the BBC wanted me to join them. And eventually it came through. I didn't know I'd still be talking about it now, after all these years of coming and going.
You're known for hundreds of goals, Barry. People talk about them all the time, but one that's special for many people, and I'm sure for you, happened and involves a player from Derby County.
Absolutely. Manchester City against Derby County, with Francis Lee returning to his old haunts. Just the moment that the ball came to him and he started the run, I just looked at him and said, you know, what I was thinking, which was the way my commentary goes. I open the mouth and hope the foot is sufficiently far removed.
Lee. Interesting. Very interesting. Oh!
And then we had a close-up of his face, which summed up both the boyhood joy of scoring a goal like that, together with the fact that he'd scored against his old club.
Look at his face! Just look at his face!
I lost my voice a bit in it too, and I said, interesting, very interesting, just look at his face. Just look at his face.
You said it with more passion than that, Barry.
Yeah, I did. I did. I did indeed. And on the second one, just look. You know, but what does it prove? The commentator's best lines are when he says the same thing twice. That one became very special to me. Didn't realise how special it was going to be.
Barry Davies' line of look at his face, just look at his face. Obviously said it with much more charisma than I just did.
He went with the emotion of the moment, which is always nice to hear in a commentator's voice.
Look at his face, look at his face! It was just brilliant, brilliant.
It's that kind of moment where he is truly getting as much out of that moment almost as Franny Lee is.
Just look at his face. It's just like, it's crazy, but that's what I think commentators almost live and die by. It's what their legacy is about a lot of the time, those special moments.
Lee. Interesting. Very
couldn't help smiling because all the crowd were cheering. All the Manchester City crowd were cheering as though, like, it was an amazing feeling. They didn't realise I was playing for another team. I always picked up the look at his face. I mean, unless he had a monitor in front of him, he could see me smiling because Barry's eyes must have been good.
How did it come that you branched out from football to do other sports?
Yes, a lot of people think that because I wasn't getting, shall we say, as many finals as might have been the case, that I went to look for other things. Not true. I was actually asked to do things before then.
You've had some great moments, some interesting moments. You had a very interesting athletics commentary, didn't you?
I did. I was standing in for David Coleman. I seem to have done that quite often in the early part of my career. And I went with Ron Pickering and Stuart Story to Düsseldorf to the first Athletics World Cup. And John Shrewsbury, who was the producer, said to me, I'd like you to do the 100 metres. You know, it was really quite a thing to be asked to do it. John Shrewsbury cued me, did the commentary on the race, stuck my neck out, Williams got up. I looked up and there was John Shrewsbury saying, he said, there was one problem. I said, what was that? He said, they lost sound.
I said to him, Barry, you're going to have to go blind and do a rerun commentary on the 100 metres, but you can't see the pictures. And he looked at me aghast and said, what? And I said, you know, just stand by, because we're going to do it now.
He said, there's the watch. He said, make damn sure you get out at 10 seconds. And he cued me.
And I said, there goes the gun. And he said, and off they go. And he did 10 seconds of commentary, and it was perfect. And they put that commentary against the pictures, and it was absolutely flawless.
Eugen Ray got the best start. Steve Williams inside him, and Leonard in lane 6 with Manea in 4th place. Can Williams get up on the inside? It's a desperately close thing. Looks as though Williams got it from Eugen Ray in 2nd place, and Leonard.
And I wouldn't have asked any other commentator who I know to try that, but Barry did it in 1, and that was a fantastic night. And he came of age that night.
And we were walking out, and Shro said to me, fancy doing the women's race tomorrow?
The headlines were made by Barry.
Indonesia have their first gold medal of the Games. What can he find now in his last jump? Oh! In with a shot, Rico scores!
This is going to be quite a contest for an awful long way, and away go the British pair.
And the Russians have done it, the block went out. Richardson, yes! Shushanova is the Olympic champion.
There are some sports that demand so much knowledge. Gymnastics was one of them, but ice skating, figure skating, surely must be one of the toughest.
Yes, how are you with the quadruple axel, which is due to come?
Triple axel, I know, is going forward, the rest are a bit of a blur.
That's the one thing we all remember. Yes. The axle is going forward. Yes, I mean, I never expected in any way to be doing that.
Dad took a phone call from the head of sport, and the call said, we'd like you to do the ice skating at the Olympics. Dad said, I know nothing about ice skating at all. To which the answer was, I know that, and there's a courier on its way to you with some videotapes about ice skating. And for the next 3 weeks, these videotapes would go in and out of the machine. We'd watch in slow motion, all of us, the whole family around the TV. This is a triple salcho, and then we'd watch it in slow motion. This is a double toe loop.
Triple salcho, you rotate and take off on the left foot. I can't remember which way it was, but thinking, how is he going to, how does this work?
3 weeks later, Dad was commentating on it at the Olympic Games, and the rest of us could watch at home and still go, we still can't tell the difference.
And he did ice skating for many, many years, and the Tall and Dean, huge TV audience figures that were commanded for that. Dad was right at the centre of it. It was brilliant.
I had been the person trying to get them back in 1984 to present their personality, which was so clear on the ice, to the public when they were off the ice. because they were both very shy.
Jane and Chris, tell me, if it's possible, which emotion is uppermost in your minds?
I can't believe it.
I
just can't believe it.
We can't remember the skate. It just happened. It came and it went.
He was never intrusive. He always came and spoke to us at the right moment, either on camera or off camera, and was very polite.
Thank you very much for a magnificent performance. I'm sure they found it absolutely breathtaking at home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are other people, you know, that sort of come to interview us, and you immediately think, oh, they were just so annoying, you know. But you never thought that of Barry, because he was just always the perfect gentleman.
Everybody wants to find out whether Torvill and Dean can turn the clock back 10 years and win the Olympic gold medal once again.
And to see Jane Torvill and Christopher Dean come back in '94 the way they did, sitting there, watching them and seeing all the politics of the sport evolve, but that must have been a highlight.
Remarkable, remarkable skaters.
And a performance that they were looking for and found, and which has put enormous pressure on the last couple to go.
They were cheated in Lillehammer. There's no doubt about that, in my opinion.
My favourite moment, my favourite commentary comes in 1988, the hockey final, the men's hockey final. Oh, Barry, those words, for me, wonderful.
Bachelor of Southgate, and Shawani of Starport makes it 3, and the players are off the bench this time. 2 goals for Imran Shawani. Where were the Germans? But frankly, who cares?
I thought, well, you know, they went through knife through butter, the German defence, and the Germans are not noted for inviting you in at any sport. So I said, where were the Germans? And then I thought, well, who gives a stuff where the Germans were, because we're going to win this now.
Well, where were the Germans? Quite frankly, who cares?
Where were the Germans? And quite frankly, who cares? Where were the German defence? But quite frankly, who cares? Is a bit of gold dust.
The way he delivered that line, you know, where are the Germans? You know, that sends it kind of shivers down my spine thinking about that.
And it is just so poignant, and just what everybody at home was probably thinking. But he had the clarity of thought and the ability to see that situation for what it was and just say something so simple and yet so powerful.
That is it in an absolute nutshell, talking from a fan's perspective. You know what? He was just going with the flow. And everybody was thinking, yeah, where were the Germans? But actually, who cares? It's in the back of the net. Get in.
The fairy tale has come true, and how deservedly so.
I have to tell you that I had no idea that that was going to be so picked up. It wasn't until I was back in England that, as Sean Curley said, he still couldn't believe that so many millions tuned in at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch a game that they probably didn't understand.
That line helped sell the game because it was part of the whole their experience of it. You know, it was repeated so often that it became synonymous with hockey, and winning with the gold medal was the third thing, was Barry's line.
Well, a wander down memory lane, or all the passing years, whatever you want to call it. I kept most of the accreditations. Wimbledon forms a big wodge. This is the very first one at Wimbledon, 1983. Figure skating, 88 World Figure Skating Championships. That was where the vote was taken for Great Britain to have the Olympic Games of 2012. Spain, 82. Various boat races. First Olympics for the record. The first World Cup, 1966. See, I was young once and I had hair once.
Aguirre, Negrete! Magnificent! Here's Souness. Oh, he's given them a chance right at the net! Knocked down by Houghton, goes for the shot. Ray Houghton! Beautifully pulled down by Bergkamp! Oh, what a goal! Dennis Bergkamp has won it for Holland! It's Samba time. One or two England supporters are doing the conga. He just scores! Winacek loses it, and Lineker says thank you very much. And there is an element of delirium on the terraces.
We talk about goals and commentary. Talk us through Maradona at the World Cup and the two very different goals.
Yes, one reasonably commentated on. The first one, a bit of a nightmare. I took a chance and suggested maybe they were thinking he was offside, which was a farcical thing to say because there was no way that he was offside.
Maradona just walked away from Hoddle then. Valdano, Hout and Maradona! Well, certainly his arm was up. Peter Shilton protested immediately, but the goal stands.
When Maradona punched the ball in, he was upset with himself because at first he didn't realise it was handball. Well, neither did the referee or half the stadium, so he didn't have to worry about that. If he did feel bad about that, he absolutely excelled himself with Maradona's second goal, the pure genius line.
He has Burruchaga to his left and Valdano to his left. He won't need any of them. Oh, you have to say that's magnificent. There is no debate about that goal. That was just pure football genius.
He absolutely summed it up with just a few words. You have to say, that's magnificent.
Oh, you have to say that's magnificent. And it's funny because Dad focuses on the next line of that.
One or two people didn't actually get exactly what I'd said, but I said that was pure football genius. I didn't think about it, but it was the right word at the right time because of the comparison with the first.
And that was Barry, really. If I could look back on one goal that Barry called and say, well, that was Barry, and he did enough. He didn't oversell it, but he made sure you knew how good it was. I think it suited the BBC, actually, to have the two of us because our styles were so different. You know, Barry's restrained delivery compared to my sort of hugely excitable one. I mean, Jonathan Martin, the head of sport, once said, Barry works from the grandstand and Motti's on the terraces.
I'm not at all sure about this.
Well, there's no question that Motti and Barry Davies had a rivalry. How friendly it was, they'd probably say it was much more friendly than it actually was. I'm not so sure it was really that friendly.
Were you a Stones or the Beatles? Were you a Davis or a Motts? And
the greats push each other on, you know, Ronaldo and Messi.
Nadal and Federer, rivalries pushing each other to the limit, and I think that's what was needed to become as great for a consistent amount of time as they did. Them two are the same.
Which may ultimately explain the chaos of the last 45 minutes.
There was a little bit of needle between them, and I think that was healthy. I think that brought the best out of both individuals. They were both big hitters.
They were both that good, both wanted to be the number one and they wanted the other person to be the number two. But they were like that all the time, loggerheads trying to get that top spot.
You know, Motti would bring his own. He was sort of more excitable Stato.
Radford again. Oh, what a goal! What a goal!
Barry Davies, an elegant commentator. Just beautiful to listen to.
Hoddle might try to curl one. And does. And makes it! Oh, beauty! That is class.
But was there a rivalry between the two of you?
We weren't throwing things at each other, and we were, perfectly friendly without being bosom pals.
Of course there was rivalry. Of course there was. It didn't spill over into my personal relationship with Barry, and I have to thank him for that because he was on the receiving end of the bad news more often than I was.
How hard was that to deal with?
There were a few games that were played around that time, but you know, his record is amazing, John Watson, and I take my hat off to him. It was good. Somebody put it to me recently that it was one of the great rivalries all time, and it wasn't on the pitch, it was in the commentary box. So, fair enough.
But when it came to the World Cup, and England and Scotland, let's just say, were both there, The BBC had two top-line commentators, dare I say, one of whom could do one match and one of whom could do the other, and similarly with cup finals.
Well, I can only say that at one World Cup there was a huge speculation.
There's been a lot of talk around Italia 90 that he was going to get the final in Italia 90, and the media was very pro the idea of him getting it at the time, and so I think it was a bit of a blow when he didn't get it.
There must be ups and downs in just any normal job, mustn't there? Of course, this is much more public and it's in the papers and they make much more of it. But I think it was a disappointment at the time.
I dare say because England were so close to getting to the final, Barry had built up his hopes that this might be his moment, and I can understand that. And curiously, you won't mind me saying this, when he finally deservedly got the World Cup final, which was in 1994, 4 years later in America, it was my turn to be told I wasn't doing it. I knew it was coming. I knew it ultimately Barry was going to get one of these finals, deservedly so.
But then you got your chance in 1994.
I did.
And of course also in the commentary position, Trevor Brooking and Barry Davies.
Well, if they'd scripted it down the road, Hollywood would have been accused of exaggeration and fantasy. Brazil in the final for the first time since 1970, and playing the country they beat in that final. Back to the future.
Obviously delighted to be doing it. He'd be, hoping to do a World Cup final for some time.
Of course, it was the only one with no goals in it.
And all the pressure now on Roberto Baggio, who has to score. The man who really has brought the team to the final now has to save them. And it's over the top. Brazil have won the World Cup of 1994.
In some ways, I want to take you back to the FA Cup coming round every year again. Yeah, I presume that was your, such an iconic event.
In the early days, sir, the cup final was the match to do. For a long, long time, it was the only live match that television was allowed to do.
Well, I think what was really interesting about the FA Cup was that every year it was a question that was being asked by the media as to who would do it. It wasn't as if Motti was definitely in the seat every year. In a way, it might have been easier had he been.
I knew how upset he was, and it came to a head when I was selected to do the cup final in 1977 and he wasn't.
That one was slightly spoiled because I was told I was doing it and then an announcement was made that I wasn't. That was difficult to take. That's the only time I made a fuss about it because I'd been lied to, not to put too fine a point on it. From then on, David came back for one and then John had quite a few since.
And then 95 came and the change was made and all of a sudden he was doing it.
Right, we're all set for this Littlewood Sponsors FA Cup final for 1995, and it's time to join our commentary team now of Trevor Brooking and first Barry Davies.
Wembley Stadium dressed overall for what is still the biggest date in its sporting calendar.
I went with him to the match and I sat alongside him.
How important was it for you to do your first one in 95?
It was important because my son was sitting next to me.
Still Matt Jackson! Oh, off the crossbar and out from Stewart! And then in! Right out!
Dad was sitting watching the match like this with his microphone here, and I was sitting alongside him. So I had one leg here and I had the other leg behind him, and I sat perched on his shoulder for the entire match.
It's a very special moment.
And then we got to the end of the match and it hadn't been a great game, but he put the microphone down and he turned to me and he held his hands out and he gave me a big hug and he said, "We've done it." And it was a sweet moment.
I did get the second one. Not a good match at all. Memorable only for one goal by Eric Cantona.
James gets there just first. Cantona!
talked about some of the moments in commentary when you go to a bigger event, but I don't think anything could prepare you for a sporting event, but it turns into a news story.
Well, put quite simply, Heysel was a day when I went to watch a football match and found myself having to talk about a disaster.
Well, Barry, Bobby Charlton and I were sitting in the commentary box, but there was this horrible incident. And I pointed it out to Barry and said, look, there are people who are in real trouble over there. And he had to make sense of it, sitting, 150, 200 yards away, and try and sort it out in his own mind about how he would describe it.
Well, for the last 50 minutes, the Heysel Stadium in Brussels, the capital of Belgium, has been a sickening and bewildering sight. As a result, there is for certain serious injury when a wall collapsed, and maybe worse.
He dealt with it in a very mature, and I keep using this word about Barry, restrained way. He told the viewers what he could see, what he knew, perhaps what he feared a little bit as well by that stage.
I've seen at least 2 stretchers carried away, and the stretchers were covered from head to foot.
It was total chaos in there. Nobody knew what was going on and trying to deal with the injured, and the last thing people thought about was a football match and television coverage.
I scribbled about 6 attempts at what I was going to say, and in the end threw them all away and just picked it up.
Just to our right, the Italian television company, who, like us, had come here to cover a football match between 2 of the great sides of Europe. And instead, their commentator was surrounded by tearful, hugely animated supporters of Juventus, complaining to him about what had happened and trying to explain to him what we were all wanting to know. How can such things go on?
I was at home, it was just me and my mum. Hearing his voice and hearing how he was having to do something so different from a sports commentary.
That was quite nerve-wracking, quite nerve-wracking. It was a drama unfolding, and to me there were two horrors, not just once. There was the horror of the actual thing, but there was also the horror for me that Barry was there.
Very sad scenes, bewildering scenes. Final of the European Cup. 30th holding of this final has been marred before it starts.
Match went ahead, and Barry, of course, then had to switch back to being a sports commentator again.
Still the fires to put out, and can the players now produce a quality of football to at least make us, for the next hour and a half, dismiss as far as is possible from our minds the scenes which preceded this 30th final of the European Champions Cup.
It was a hard job, very hard job, and he did it. He did it very well.
It takes a special broadcaster to be able to switch tone like that and be able to deal with it, and for people not to think, oh, this is a sports broadcaster talking about a serious event. It's just a broadcaster dealing with it and dealing with it very well.
For you, having seen what you'd seen, how difficult was it then to get into football commentary mode?
I'm not sure that I actually ever did quite get into football commentary mode. It was an impossible task, really.
And Liverpool's run of success in European Cup finals comes to an end. Juventus create history by becoming the first side to win all 3 of the UEFA tournaments. But this is not a night when football will be remembered. The official figures of the tragedy which occurred before a ball was kicked. 36 people killed, more than 200 injured, and 15 of them seriously.
It had taken a lot out of him emotionally, actually, the next day. He was absolutely drained from it.
Obviously, it was a relief to be back home, and they were sort of very understanding. But to the best of my knowledge, I was out doing a football match on the Saturday, so I mean, I didn't feel I had any right to claim any special dispensation. You know, I was the reporter on the spot. I did my job, that's all. Oh, welcome. A little cooler in here than out there. This is our home. You'll find it's a bit of a portrait gallery of the family. One or two works of art. The greatest work of art in here, though, is now at the sink, which is not often the place that she goes to. She's a very worldwide lady.
That's Mark and his family. Gigi, aged about 7 or 8, receiving a school prize from Princess Anne.
And down here, if I get the telephone out of the way, you'd better see the event when Mark was competing for the boat race crew at Cambridge. My daughter Gigi was involved with the sponsors at the time, so we were all together. Mother was watching.
It's got huge memories for me, that photograph. It was a really happy day.
I've been very lucky because Dad and I have done quite a lot of things together in terms of my job and his job. And one of the first examples was the Oxford and Cambridge University boat race. I was actually the press officer for the boat race, but then the media were phoning up saying, can we do an interview with you and your father and your brother, who's also involved?
And I bet you treasure that photo of the three of you.
Yes, I do.
It's a lovely cutting that Dad still has. Yeah, happy memories of that time.
Jonathan Martin, the head of sport, said that he wanted me to take over the boat race, give a try. He said it's not just about a rowing contest, it's much bigger than that. And he thought that would suit my style, and I loved it.
Oxford at 6:29. We are seeing a powerful performance here, as well as a rhythmical one by the Light Blues.
You know, the boat race is a sort of anachronistic, funny, unique event, but it doesn't matter. A big moment in any sporting event is a big moment, and he always got them right.
Talk about the 1 foot race. I mean, it was probably the greatest race they've ever had there.
Yes. Never did I expect to commentate on something that was decided by 1 foot after 6 months of preparation.
And there's a real push coming here from Cambridge. Jim and Martin calling for the push. It's got a bit closer.
What I remember about watching that boat race is Barry said straight away, that's who's won.
On the line in 2003, Barry Davies called it, and he got it absolutely right.
This is a great finishing rhythm from Cambridge, but Oxford holding on. Cambridge closing. Oxford coming to the finishing post. This is going to be an unbelievable finish. Oxford have won. Oxford have won.
He called it, and I thought, oh, he better not be wrong, but he wasn't wrong.
And I thought, I've got to call this. And of course, I'm doing it off a monitor. I'm not down at the finish. So I said, and Oxford have won. I tell you, within 1 stroke, it would have been Cambridge.
Oh, they can't believe it. Neither crew. One of the greatest finishes of all time. Barely more than the canvas. Oh, less.
But there was about 20 seconds or 30 seconds, which seemed like 2 hours before they had made the official announcement.
And it's confirmed. Oxford are the winners. But good heavens, how can you talk about losers after a race like that?
And of course, then they had to decide, did they bring the old man back after 5 years? And I think they probably made the right decision, although I was disappointed, I must say.
Yeah.
But don't tell Andrew Cotter.
I learned from him not so much by asking him advice, although he'd be happy to give it. I learned from him by watching what he's done in the past. And growing up, watching him, all the time you're learning. You don't think you are, but when you're watching sport as a youngster, watching Barry Davies, you're learning that's how it should be done.
Good evening and welcome to the second semi-final quiz ball.
The tension here in the arena is huge. Drawn by 4 Windsor Greys, Her Majesty.
Commentator Barry Davies.
No, Barry, it's hockey on skates.
Barry Davies skates.
And I think they're going to do it. smiling Lord Mayor with the City of London. We've done it! London have won it! The Olympic flame burns again in Athens.
Oh, cracky.
Something of the old adage here of a good big un and a good little un. Oh, now that is magnificent. And it's now down to the 9 judges, but surely they will feel too that it's been good enough, and there's a standing ovation for them.
Yes.
You and Robbie Williams in a duet.
Yes, and
Who would have
I
thought
was
it?
never invited when they won the BAFTA, or what it was that they got. And he didn't know, I rewrote the whole script. So I changed it and they were very happy with it. And it was fun. I've since done a piece for The Rapper, only 2 or 3 days ago. Yeah, with Mr. Nasty.
Knuckle in, give me some skin. Yo, pimp, come listen to my album now.
Were you rapping, Barry?
He tried to teach me to do a bit of rapping.
The gal them wind their waist. I put the man them all on base.
And you've done other things outside of it. But one of the things that just everyone talks about, Big Train.
Big Train. Yes, not too many people get a phone call saying, we'd like you to take part in the staring competition.
Well, here we are. We're all set. It's a capacity crowd, and we're ready for the World Championship stare-out final.
It was done perfectly as a sporting event. So who else would you want to do commentary on that but the man who could commentate on anything?
And they eventually persuaded me to go in. I didn't know if I was going to see 2 people staring at each other, like we are now.